of the podcast. I'm joined by Eric as well, and we're going to be mostly talking about what we saw in Game 1, uh, as well as a preview for Game 2 on Sunday. And we are going to go ahead and make another DraftKings lineup to share for you guys, as well as go over a little bit how our Game 1 DraftKings lineup went. So I'll just let Eric say hi to everybody, and we'll get started.
Yeah, what's going on, everybody? This is our second episode now, and I don't know how many listeners we got on the first one, but I know people that I've talked to and some comments I've seen. We got a lot of positive feedback, so I'm definitely glad to keep doing this. And I guess that's it. I can't remember.
Yeah.
I don't know why I had a brain fart there, but yeah, I'm excited to talk some more basketball and NBA finals and everything. So
yeah,
sweet. So let's do this.
And then just another thing I wanted to put out to you guys. The logo that you see in the artwork image for the whatever site you're listening on, I just made that logo in 5 minutes from a default image, sort of bank. So that's not going to be the main one going forward. It's just kind of a placeholder just for now. If anybody has any really interesting ideas for a logo, I'd be open to hearing about them. But I'll get a real one up soon for you guys. So
yeah, we're definitely still in the rough stages, rough draft stages here. So
yeah, because obviously the show is not just all about basketball, and it's the basketball. The football season when it comes up, that's going to be the main focus of the show. But right now, NBA Finals is the hot sports topic of, so we'll roll with it for now. But just know that logo will be changed. So starting about the Game 1 from last night, I thought I was really impressed with the Raptors all throughout the game, because to me, the thing that makes Golden State so dominant and so unbeatable is their ability to just come back from any deficit at any time and just run away with it. But Toronto played excellent defensively against the Warriors. Believe in the first quarter they only scored 21 points or something. They really held the Warriors back from scoring, and the Warriors' score was actually benefited a lot by second chance points. So the Warriors, I know that their shooting percentage was pretty low across the board from their players, but without those second chance points, I think that this could have been much more of a dominant win for Toronto, other than just 9 points. But it just felt to me the whole game that Toronto was going to win the game, because the Warriors just, they just didn't, they never showed up in the game to me where I felt like they were going to win. Even when Toronto, I think, only was up by 3 points in the fourth quarter, I think that there was, a sense of confidence that Toronto had that Houston and Portland lacked when they gave up big leads in their series. So, just I think that's going to be a sign that this series is going to go 6 or 7. I originally predicted Golden State in 6, but now I'm going to change that to Golden State in 7, just because of more respect for Toronto. I predicted them to win Game 1, as did Eric, but from what I saw in the game, it gave me a lot of confidence going forward. So, Eric, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I really only got to see the fourth quarter of this game. So I've seen the highlights and things like that. I was working though, so I didn't get to watch it live. But to piggyback off of what Zach said about the Blazers and the Rockets lacking the confidence when the Warriors came back, I'm definitely going to agree with that because the Warriors have always been known for being such a strong third quarter team. Like whether they're winning or losing, like that's their quarter for whatever reason. Like they always come out in the second half strong.
Mm-hmm.
And looking at the score, and they did outscore the Raptors in the third quarter, but only by 3 points. And so that's a lot better than what most teams do against the Warriors in that situation. So I think the fact that the Raptors held them off in the third quarter, I believe that gave them the confidence to, finish strong and win the game. And I'm sure being on the home court helped them. They had their
Mm-hmm.
fans backing them up, and that always helps. But I don't know. I mean, I initially had predicted, the Warriors to win the series in 6 games also, but I might actually even be convinced on switching it to the Raptors winning it in 6 or 7 games. This series it's just, for me, this series is almost like too hard to predict. I mean, most people going into it probably thought the Warriors were going to sweep them, but I don't know. I mean, I figured the Raptors would at least win like maybe one of the games at home and then win like game 4 or 5 or something before losing. But I don't know. I did feel like a dominance from the Raptors in this game, and I thought they did really well, containing their star play. I mean, Steph Curry definitely had his moments, and he got to the free
Mm-hmm.
throw line a lot, making all 14 of his free throws. But like Draymond Green was 2 for 9, and Klay Thompson, which while he was 8 of 17, I know he struggled early in the game. He did start to catch fire a little late in the game when I was watching in the fourth
Mm-hmm.
quarter, but for the most part, they contained even Klay Thompson pretty well also. And I don't know. I feel like the Warriors are kind of shook right now. Like I could especially see with the way Draymond was after the game. I know there was a foul that was called on him. I don't remember who he was guarding. It was I believe it was Van Vliet had run in to the paint
Mm-hmm.
and put up a shot, and Draymond got called with a foul. And when they showed the replay in slow mo, like it was a questionable foul call, but you could tell though that the foul call really frustrated him. And
I think every foul call
I
frustrates
mean, yeah, every
Draymond.
foul, yeah, but I guess with it being late in the game and the Warriors
Yeah.
were trying to come back, and it just seems like a lot of times when I've watched him play, when he gets frustrated like that, it affects his performance. And then, he's such like a vocal person for that team. Sometimes it feels like if he gets frustrated, then, it can affect the whole
Yeah.
dynamic of the team. I mean, I guess mainly when I think of him with that was in the finals where they blew the 3-1 lead to the Cavs. I mean, he got when they had
Mm-hmm.
when they had the 3-1 lead, like he got that technical foul, and which I guess I forget the rule in the NBA where if you get so many, you get a 1-game suspension. But that technical foul had put him at the suspension mark, and then he got suspended for the 5th game of that series. And then, that was very hurtful for them as they ended up, blowing that lead. And so I don't know. I don't know if that will necessarily affect the Warriors too much going into game 2, but I do worry that it, for them, that it's going to. Now, since I'm rooting for the Raptors, I'm, pretty happy about it. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess Draymond too, like yelled at Drake after the game. Like Drake was kind of taunting him, I guess, whatever. I don't know what was said, but Draymond like fired back at him. The Raptors are under the Warriors' skin right now, I believe. So um, I'm looking forward to seeing, how the rest of the series goes. But I mean, if the Raptors can keep playing like the way they did in this game, and lead pretty much the whole time and kind of even have, be dominating for periods of the game, like I could see them actually winning the series. It would not surprise me. So And on top of that, I mean, Kyle Lowry was only like 2 of something. Like he had a horrible game offensively, um, and yet they still dominant. And really, even Kawhi wasn't super effective either, which I know you wanted to talk about that a little bit. But
Yeah.
um, with Kawhi and Lowry struggling in spurts, and for them to still dominate the way they did, I mean, if they were clicking, it would have been an even bigger win. So, but yeah, I know you wanted to give some thoughts on that, so
Yeah, so
I'll
I'll
let you
talk about
continue with that.
I'll talk about Kawhi. He had 23 points, 8 rebounds, and 5 assists. But for Kawhi's standards, he's been averaging like 30 plus points in the playoffs. So this was a down game for him. I remember in the first quarter him missing wide open 3 pointers. And of course, this was concerning to me at the time because I had him as my captain in my DraftKings lineup for game one. So I was frustrated at Kawhi and his lack of involvement. I think he played 43 minutes, but it didn't feel like he played 43 minutes just because of how, he wasn't really used a whole lot in their offense. But to his credit, he did come up in the fourth quarter, getting a lot of free throws and making a lot of them, uh, which was important for him. But, and I just feel like Kawhi Leonard in this game, his stats are a little bit overrated because of the free throws, because of you know him getting the benefit of the superstar foul calls. Some of them were a little questionable, and there were times where he would just isolate with the ball, just dribble, 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 and Iguodala did a great job of defending him. And he would dribble out through the whole shot clock and make a pass to a guy, Van Vliet or Danny Green, somebody on the 3 point line, and they would make the shot. And they got 3 points from that series, or, that series down on offense, but it wasn't necessarily Kawhi, just not taking over. Um, Obviously, Siakam was the star of the game. He kind of took over for the whole portion of the game, getting 32 points for him. But this is the thing about the Raptors, though, that to me is so interesting and unique, is because Kawhi Leonard is their number one, but who's their number two? Because in the Bucks series that they had last week, there were times, like, I think in all 4 of the games that they won, their like second best player was different. Like there'd be one game where Siakam would go off. There'd be one game where Kyle Lowry would go off, or Ibaka or Van Vliet, and you never really know who's going to be that second guy for him, which I think makes it difficult for the opposing team not knowing which guy is going to come in and light it up. Whereas on the Warriors right now without KD, it's pretty predictable their offense with Steph and Clay because there are other like bench players like guys like Kevon Looney and Urepko, McKinney. Those guys like don't play a whole lot of minutes and they don't necessarily get a whole lot of points.
Oh yeah,
So
for sure. You're not looking to Andre Iguodala to get have a 30-point game. Like I mean, even in Draymond, who's even their third best player. I mean, he just he's just kind of an all around like guy. But if you're down by like 10 points and you need someone to take over the game, like you're not looking to Draymond Green
no.
to do that. I mean, it's Steph and Clay. Like that's like you said,
Mm-hmm.
that's who they're relying on. And I think that's a great point that you brought up about the Raptors. I mean, that's going to be difficult for the Warriors to contain them, because let's say, okay, Siakam went off last game on them, and so
Mm-hmm.
maybe the Warriors are probably going to try to adjust to contain him more. Well, if you start like double teaming him, well, then that's going to open up, Danny Green for more 3 pointers, or maybe Marc Gasol more baskets in the paint, or maybe Kyle Lowry gets more looks.
Yeah.
It's difficult to. I mean, with Kyle Lowry's postseason track record, I don't know if I'm necessarily trusting him too much, and game one was kind of another example of that offensively.
Hmm.
He had some other good moments from what I saw, but
He was, yeah.
2 of 9, 2 of 9 from the field is, not good. He's definitely going to have to be better for the Raptors, but still, like, the Raptors have a solid lineup. Even their guys off the bench can come in and do damage. Whereas, like you said, you don't really get
Hmm.
that feeling with the Warriors. So,
Yeah.
still,
Which to me, it feels like, it does feel like Kevin Durant's going to have to come back for Golden State to win this because, if game one was any indication, like they need Kevin Durant, they need that extra offensive guy to get them 30 and to, carry them for when Steph isn't like shooting like 60% from threes. But the thing about the Raptors is, defensively, how their starting lineup, how talented defensively they are. Kawhi Leonard's been on all defensive teams. Marc Gasol's won Defensive Player of the Year multiple times. Lowry was drawing charges. Ibaka has led the league in blocks before. Like, this is a scrappy team that, draws charges. They block shots. They do all those things defensively that the Warriors in their last two series against Portland and Houston, didn't really have to face. Portland's defense isn't very good. Um, Houston defensively, James Harden isn't very good on, guarding like Steph.
oh, no,
So,
James Harden's a terrible defender.
so now they're having to go up against a team that is defensively, minded. Like in the first quarter, they only scored 21 points. That's not normal for Golden State. So, I do think part of this was because, the game was in Toronto, game one, like Golden State hadn't played in a week and a half. Toronto had came off an emotional series. So that's why for game two, I am predicting the Warriors to win game two. But I would not be surprised if Toronto wins just because, who would bet against Toronto after, the first game that they played in this series. But I've got the Warriors winning, mainly because I think Steph is gonna play a more efficient game. I think he's gonna play better. I think Clay's gonna play better. I think that the longer the series goes, I give more of an advantage to the Warriors from their head coach Steve Kerr being in this situation so many times to be able to strategize and come up with a game plan that's going to be able to stop them. If Iguodala ends up playing, I think he's likely to play in game two. He showed that he can stop Kawhi, so I'm going to take Golden State in game two. I know a lot of people are probably going to take Toronto just because of how well they did in game one, but I am taking Golden State by, I'll give them like 5 points they win by, but I want to hear, Eric, who you think will win this game.
Yeah, it's kind of similar to what you said in terms of the fact that, you could see it going either way. Like, like you make your prediction, like how you said Golden State, but then you wouldn't be surprised if it's Toronto. For me, it's the same way, but I'm gonna go the opposite way though. Like, I feel like Toronto is going to win the game again. I feel like they're going to win game two. My guess obviously I'm going to want to see game two before, I make a prediction for game three, but my guess would be that Golden State doesn't get their first win until their first home game.
Okay.
And then to me, game four will be the pivotal, like, is it going to be tied and then probably go 7, or like could Toronto maybe steal it and then run away with it? But I think Toronto's going to win again just because, they're still at home this game. Obviously the fans are going to be even more fired up now that they've, won a game. And I think I do think Kyle Lowry will have at least a little bit of a better game. I mean, I've mentioned a couple of times already since we started this podcast that most people know that he's not necessarily a great playoff performer, but I do think he's going to be a little bit better. I don't think there will be as much attention on him, and I just feel like right now with which I know we're not doing our DraftKings lineups yet, but
Mm-hmm.
um, the biggest advantage I'm still giving the Raptors is the fact that they just have better bigs. And um, I was curious because I saw that DeMarcus Cousins only played 8 minutes in the game. And when I was making my lineup, I was debating on if I would pick him because his salary dropped way low. And so when I researched like why he only played 8 minutes in the first game, the articles that I was reading were saying that I guess I don't know if you caught this, Zach, since you saw the whole game,
Yeah.
but from what I saw or from what I read, DeMarcus Cousins did very poorly on the defensive end in the limited time he was out there. And
That's correct. Yeah.
other than free throws, he didn't make any of his shots from the field. So I had thought the Warriors needed to get DeMarcus Cousins out there as much as possible, but I guess because of the injuries he's had, he's just he's not performing very well right now. And then without him, I guess he's still going to play, but without him being at his potential, the Warriors just don't have a great big guy. They've got Draymond, who's scrappy and can guard bigs
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, but Siakam just went off for 32 points in the last game, and from the highlights I
Siakam
saw, it looked
definitely
like
won that battle.
it looked like Draymond was on him a majority
Yeah.
of the time, and then even if Draymond was playing well defensively in the last game, he can't guard Siakam and Marc Gasol at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Or if both of them and Serge Ibaka are out there at the same time, he can't guard all three of them. And Looney, he's a decent player, but they don't have anybody that can contain that, and that's why I give the biggest advantage to the Raptors in this series, because the Warriors in the previous series that they've played, with the Trailblazers, like Nurkic, was obviously out for the year with that terrible injury he had, so he didn't play at all, and
Mm-hmm.
Enes Kanter was banged up. So the Trailblazers were relying on Myers Leonard and to
Oh
be like
gosh.
their big guy. And I don't. I
He
mean,
to
he's
Myers' point though, like I follow the Trailblazers pretty closely, and he had his coming out game in that game 4 where he scored I think 25
yeah
points. That
he
was
definitely had some great moments in the series, but he's not someone you're relying on to be
no,
your starting
of
big man
course,
for a
yeah.
7 game series. And then with the Rockets, they have Clint Capella, but he's more of a defensive player. Like he's not gonna go out there and get you 30 points a game. So the Warriors really had no threat there necessarily. So, but now whereas with the Raptors, they've got Marc Gasol to deal with, they've got Siakam to deal with, and Ibaka to deal with, and I don't think they have the firepower to handle that. Whereas I think the Raptors do have the players necessary to try to handle the perimeter players of the Warriors. Obviously
Hmm.
no one's going to fully shut down Steph and Clay, but I think they have enough firepower to contain them. And I get another advantage I noticed on the defensive end not on the offensive end for the Raptors with Siakam. So I do sometimes feel like Draymond Green's defense gets a little overhyped and overrated a little bit. Like he's definitely a good defender, but
Hmm.
he's better at guarding like a big guy in the paint. Like he's a bruiser. He
Hmm.
can affect their moves in the paint and stuff like that. Now, where he's not a good defender and where I feel like he gets overrated is if he has to guard somebody out on the perimeter. And then like the highlights that I saw, and I noticed this in the fourth quarter a little bit from what I watched last night, a lot of times Siakam was taking the ball up, by the 3-point line, and then he would basically like run, pretty much right by Draymond and get an easy score. Or if he got by Draymond and then another defender came up to pursue him, then he's kicking it out to the guy on the perimeter for the three.
Hmm.
So I feel like Draymond's perimeter defense is very overrated in that aspect. I don't think he's great, and I feel like that got exposed in the first game. Now, I'm curious as to what, kind of adjustment Steve Kerr is going to try to make on that. I don't know what he really can do, but
Yeah.
um, you know, but I'm I guess getting way back. I know I kind of got off track with a couple things there, but so my prediction for game 2 is I'm picking the Raptors to win again. I think it might be a little closer this time, but I'm gonna give them the win by like 4 or 5 points. So
Okay.
that's my official. I know in the last podcast, I had said that I thought the Warriors were going to win, but then I changed it at the end.
It's a
But
good thing you changed
yeah,
it.
it's a good thing I changed it. Whew, they'd be like, man, this
um,
guy doesn't have any credibility.
well,
But no,
now,
yeah, I'm making it official. So
yeah, now after this episode, though, one of us will get one incorrect prediction. So
yes,
it's
yeah,
gonna
yeah,
happen for sure. One of us will be right, but
yeah. We're not going to
we'll talk
be.
about DraftKings later. But yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see how that goes because obviously I'm gonna be rooting for my DraftKings players, and then secondly Toronto, and then so I've got a lot of conflicting interests, in this one game because I'm gonna have, Warriors and Raptors players, a combination of those guys. Personally, I want Toronto to win. My prediction is Golden State wins, so there's gonna be a lot of
Yeah,
things I'm
you're
juggle
torn there
watching
for
this.
sure. I mean, even I guess I do. I know that I do have a majority of Golden State players in my DraftKings lineup, which I'll explain like when we get to it. Because I know, if you're listening, you're probably thinking, well, you picked the Raptors to win. Why did you pick more Golden State players? But which I do have a reason for that, which I will get to.
Yeah.
But despite the conflict of interest with the DraftKings and stuff, like I would obviously just the Raptors winning is the number one priority for me, like in terms of my rooting interest.
Hmm.
Maybe if I had a little more money on this DraftKings thing, I would go in that direction. But obviously, I want the Raptors to win, and at least I predicted them to win too. So that'll be, but like I said, in
Yeah.
game 3, I'm probably going to pick the Warriors to win, depending on how the second game goes. So then I'll have the same conflicting problem that you
Hmm.
have. But
See,
but
to me,
yeah,
thing
go
is
ahead.
with the conflicting thing, and the reason why our DraftKings lineup wasn't for that much money, but the reason why still, that was my top priority, so to say, in rooting interest is because the NBA is not my favorite sport. I'll admit, out
True.
of all the sports. So, and it's not something that I really grew up, watching and loving. Like I said in the last one, the first time I really started, watching the NBA was the 2011 finals with the Miami Heat uh, and Dallas Mavericks. But even still, I don't watch, many. To be fair, I didn't really watch that many regular season games. I watched a lot of the playoffs, but when it comes to the football, and Eric and I both share a hometown team for football. So when it comes to, football, I think for both college and NFL, we both have deeper loyalties and deeper feelings towards those teams, whereas we would despise, and every time the Patriots play, we want the Patriots to lose, for example.
Oh
But when it comes
yes.
to the Warriors, even though the Warriors are like the Patriots of the NBA, since the NBA to me isn't my number one love, I don't have as strong of a hate as I do for the Patriots as I do for the Warriors. You know what I mean? So
True. Good point.
I'm still rooting for the Raptors to win, obviously, but it's not as crucial that the Warriors lose to me as it is, watching the Patriots lose or something like that. Um, but yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, yeah, I guess for me, I mean, I'm in the same situation, like, it's like for those of you that are listening, I mean, football is my, number one favorite sport out of all the sports. But, um, and while with basketball, while I don't necessarily have like a true loyalty to any team, but I mean, OKC has been my, favorite team for a while, and it all started with because of Kevin Durant. Like, I really liked him, and so that's why I was a fan of them. And so when he, you know, like I said, my original loyalty was really to Kevin Durant, not necessarily the
Mm-hmm.
Oklahoma City Thunder. So my whole thing was like, well, I'm going to be a fan of whatever team Durant is on. So when his big decision came, I was like, like they were like everybody really thought he was, well, at least from what I was seeing, like it looked like most people thought he was going to stay with the Thunder because they could offer him more money and they still had a really good team, like a contending
Mm-hmm.
team and all that. Like he would probably stay there. But when the list of like, teams that he met with like came out, I was like, I could get myself to be a fan of any of these teams that he might go to, unless it's the Warriors. And that's where he went. And so I think that's why my hatred for the Warriors runs deeper than it normally would with basketball not being my favorite sport, just because it doesn't make sense to me how Kevin Durant, was up. He had a team that was up 3-1 against the Warriors, and then blew the series lead, and then went and joined the team that beat him.
Oh yeah.
And I definitely lost a lot of respect for him when that happened. And so then when that happened, I was like, man, like what team do I, pick now, since I don't want to be a Warriors fan? And I was like, well, I've already been rooting for the Thunder with Durant all this time. Like I might as well just keep rooting for him. And so, that's why, I don't know, even though Durant hasn't been playing in this series, and whether he comes back or not, I know we may talk about that in another podcast, depending on how long he keeps being ruled out. But I'm just, I just hate the Warriors. And so I'm like, for me, it's like, go whoever is playing them,
Okay.
So
Well,
right
see,
now,
I actually have a
right now it's the Raptors. So
yeah. See, I've got a question for you though, because and I truly don't know the answer to this question, but I know you're anti LeBron. You're not a LeBron fan, and you
yeah,
generally root against
not a
LeBron.
LeBron fan either.
So in the past finals between the Warriors and Cavaliers, were you rooting for the Cavaliers or were you rooting for the Warriors?
Man, those, I will admit, those were very difficult NBA finals for me to watch. Now, I will say the first series between the two teams, I rooted for the Warriors because at that time they didn't have Kevin Durant.
Yeah.
So I didn't hate them per se, like I do now, but that was before they had won a bunch of times too.
Mm-hmm.
So I rooted for them. And then the next season was when the Warriors won 73 games, and everybody said that, oh, well, like people like ESPN and, all the
Mm-hmm.
national media were saying that this was the best basketball team ever. And I was like, no, like I have always felt like that Michael Jordan is the best player. And so, and I've always thought that his like two different three-peats with the Bulls were like the greatest basketball, dynasty
Yeah.
within the last, several years. And so I then rooted for the Cavaliers in that series, even though I don't like LeBron, and even though they didn't
Okay.
have Kevin Durant yet, I rooted for the Cavs in that one. But that was why, was because of the
Okay. Yeah.
media saying this was the best team ever. Now, once Kevin Durant got there, I obviously hated that. But so then the two seasons where Kevin Durant were there, I did root for the Warriors. Now it was a very mild,
Yeah.
like when
Yeah.
the Warriors won the series, trust me, I was not jumping up and down for joy, like, yes, they won, I
Yeah.
was just like, well, cool. Like for me, the lesser of two evils won. Okay.
Okay.
Whatever.
Okay.
Like, I guess I'll take it.
Uh-huh.
But now that it's a different, team in there, and, obviously LeBron couldn't be in there against the Warriors since he's, in the same conference as them now. But, yeah, I was like, pretty much whoever was playing the Warriors, like I was rooting for the Clippers to beat them, even though I knew they wouldn't.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I was rooting for the Rockets to beat them, even though I'm not really a big James Harden fan either. And then I do somewhat have, even though they're big rivals with the Thunder, like I have a reasoning for kind of liking the Trailblazers, and I'm a pretty big fan of Damian Lillard, so definitely was rooting for them. But of course, then they got swept, so now it's the Raptors.
Okay. It's crazy, man, because that 1 year ago in the conference finals, both, it could have been the Celtics and Rockets playing each other in the finals. Both those teams
Mm-hmm.
had home court, game sevens on their home court. And actually, I believe uh, they were also up 3-2 in their series, and both those
They
teams lost game six,
they
right?
were,
Yeah, so
yeah, they were.
so each of those teams, the Celtics and the Rockets, each had two chances to beat the Cavs and Warriors, and they couldn't do that. So yeah,
Yeah, man.
I was obviously rooting for those teams as well. But I still had that feeling in my, I wasn't doing podcasts or writing down my predictions or anything, but like, even though those teams were down 3-2, I was still, you know, under, I was still thinking that, this is probably going to, it's probably going to be another Cavaliers Warriors, just because the Celtics, I felt like, hadn't matured enough, and I felt like the Warriors were kind of like being disrespected. They felt like disrespected, and then elevated their game in those last two games against Houston.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'm definitely gonna agree with that also. Although I don't, I mean, obviously there's no way you can like go back and, change,
mhm.
go back in time and change events, whatever. But I do think the Warriors and Rockets series could have ended differently if Chris Paul hadn't gotten injured at the end of Game 5,
Yeah,
because he ended up being out for Game 6 and 7. But the crazy thing is that even despite that, the Rockets still could have won. But I don't remember exactly what it was, but they went something like 1 for 30 from 3 point range in Game
it,
7 or
yeah,
something
yeah, yeah.
horrendous. Like, I mean, if they even just made a third of those threes, they probably win the championship that year. Like,
Hmm.
I don't know, man. Like, yeah, but yeah, I like you said, like when Chris Paul went down, even with the 3-2 lead, I felt like the Warriors were probably going to win, and with the Celtics with Kyrie being out, I didn't feel like they had enough firepower to stop the Cavs, and so I did feel like the Cavs were going to win that series also. But um, yeah, so there's a little back history of our rooting interests, I guess, for the
Yep.
listeners.
Yeah. So yeah, Eric explained his NBA full rooting interest. So I guess I'll explain my team, sort of say. So
Yeah, go
the
for it, man.
team, yeah. So my favorite team, and the team that I most want to see, win a championship, would be the Orlando Magic, because that's the team that I really started watching basketball. I know I said I watched the first finals and stuff. I watched was the Heat and Mavericks, but I can also remember watching some of the games between the Magic and Lakers in their finals that they played. And obviously, Eric and I are both from Florida, not from Orlando, from Jacksonville, but Orlando is the closest team to Jacksonville, and my grandfather is also a pretty big Magic fan, so he was, a reason why I rooted for the Magic growing up. But the problem with being a Magic fan is they've been so bad. They've
Mm-hmm.
been they've they made the playoffs this year, which was exciting, but they were on like a 6 or 7 year streak ever since Dwight Howard left them, where they were in the lottery every year. But the thing is they were in the lottery, but they were never the worst team in the lottery, so they never ended up getting like the number one pick. They always had like the number 4 to like number 8 pick, and those ended up being a lot of busts. Aaron Gordon is probably in also another frustrating thing with the Magic is they trade away a lot of their good players. Like that trade where they had with Oladipo and Serge Ibaka, you know, when it first happened, I was like, what are they doing? Like, you're trading for an old. You've already got Vucevic, you've got bigs, you know. So, and they haven't had a point guard in years. I know DJ Augustine was okay in this year's playoffs, but you know they've got Vucevic, they've got Aaron Gordon. It seems like every year they just keep drafting these bigs, and so I'm not a fan of the Magic's management, so to say. I was a fan of them picking out Markelle Fultz just because you know he was pretty. They just got him for like a draft pick or something. So, and I think he's got potential. I don't expect him to be like a superstar or anything, but if he's anything worth that number one pick still in him, it'll be a nice addition for him since they obviously don't have very many point guards on their team that are of quality. So during those years where the Magic were so bad, I needed a team in the playoffs to root for because, the Thunder for Eric, have made the playoffs pretty much every year. But so the team that I picked was the Portland Trailblazers, which, is about the farthest away you can get from Florida. I've never been to Oregon, never been to Portland, but there's something I just, like about the team. My dad's was a Supersonics fan growing up, so he's, turned into a Portland fan because they're like the Pacific Northwest team up there. And so that was a reason. And also, I'm just a fan of Damian Lillard, both his game and his his beliefs. How he's like not one of those guys that's gonna leave to like make a super team or like force his way out or demand a trade. Like he's very loyal to the team that he's on, and I really respect that for him. And I know Eric said earlier he's a fan of him as well, probably for the similar reasons. But his game is fun to watch. He shoots a lot of deep threes. He's not really a trash talker. He's not really controversial. He doesn't say crazy things like Kyrie did that one time when he said the Earth was flat. So
oh man, yeah,
he's a very
I
likable guy,
with that,
which is
for
why.
sure.
And also they're not like a dynastic team or anything, so it's not like I'm jumping on a bandwagon, so to say. They made the Western Conference Finals this year, but I think the last time they had made it was like 20 years ago or something. So they've had their ups and downs as well, but that's kind of been, and plus they're in the Western Conference, so they don't really face the Magic often, only twice a year, and they're not like the Miami Heat like rivals with them. But I will say that it's interesting because this season I probably watched the most college basketball I've ever watched because of how good Tennessee was doing this year, which is our favorite college team. And they've got 3 players that are going to be in the upcoming draft in a few weeks. So it's going to be interesting to see what teams get, draft those players. And then I feel like that might also, I might, like, let's say Grant Williams gets drafted by like the Spurs. I might end up like watching some Spurs games or, rooting for the Spurs, whereas normally I wouldn't care for the Spurs. So, but as far as basketball goes, like, it's not like football where like the Jaguars to me are like the only team that I care about winning. Like I watch every Jaguars game, and to me any other team can win, but the Jaguars are the ones that like matter the most to me. So in basketball, it's kind of like I've got kind of like a list, or I'm gonna kind of end up having like a list of teams to watch.
These Tennessee guys get drafted.
Yeah. So that's my that's a little bit of background on my rooting interests for the NBA. For anybody that doesn't know me listening, you might learn something new. If you do know me, you might have learned something new too. So
Yeah, I mean, and same with me, man. I don't know if everybody, that knows me like really knows my story of like, why I'm a Thunder fan or why I have the rooting interest that I have. So, I think that was a good idea for both of us to share that, with the
Yeah.
listeners. So that was a good idea. Kind of
Mhm.
impromptu topic.
Yeah, it was. That wasn't like a planned topic. Yeah, going into this. So yeah, but moving on now to talk about DraftKings. I'll let Eric go ahead and share his lineup first, and then I'll go into mine. So
Awesome. Yeah, guys. Zach's putting my lineup on the screen for me here. So, in the lineup we did for game one last night, my lineup came in first place out of the 10 people that were in it. I think I scored like
congratulations
two.
on that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I won a whole $5.40 for placing in the top five. So, haven't decided what I'm going to do with that just yet. Well, I used $3 of it to buy my lineup for Sunday, so
Yep.
I've got 240 left. I don't know what I'll do with it, but I'll might buy a candy bar or something. But uh, but anyway, yeah, I want to say that I scored like 220 points or something like that. I was almost upset in a way because I was like, man, I should have maybe even entered a bigger contest because I won our group by like I think second place was like 30 points behind
Oh
me.
yeah.
So
I think like
um,
because I was watching this the standings and stuff throughout the game, and I want to say like after the first quarter, like no one was even close to catching you. Like I could tell after the first quarter, like because Gasol had such a big first quarter, and I
yeah,
think
I
only
don't
like
think a lot of him.
not
I don't
many
think a
people
lot of
had him.
people had
Yeah,
him.
so he was big for
Um,
you, and I was like, Eric's got this. He if he's not going to get first, he's definitely going to win. Whereas I have
yeah,
kind of an interesting story about how my standings went, but I'll share it with you later, and I'll let Eric continue his.
yeah. Since I had to work last night, I didn't even get to check the score until it was halftime. But I saw at that point that I had a pretty good sized lead and felt pretty confident. But um, yeah, so I guess overall in the grand scheme of things, I kind of have a similar lineup to last time where I kind of have a little more consistency as opposed to the all-star players. I did want to have Curry and Kawhi Leonard in my lineup, but I opted not to do that because I felt like I didn't get enough value across the board. So I actually switched my captain last um, for game one. I had Stephen Curry as my captain, which ended up being a great choice.
Hmm.
Pascal Siakam actually scored more points though than Stephen Curry did in terms of the regular utility points.
Hmm.
So I'm switching and picking Siakam as my captain. He is a little bit cheaper than Curry and Leonard, and so I felt like I could get a little more value throughout the rest of my team by picking him as my captain as opposed to Curry or Leonard. Um, and he had a dominant game. And I know the Warrior. My only concern with picking him as my captain is that I do feel like the Warriors are going to do what they can to try to make adjustments and slow him down in the next game. And I know he's not going to hit like 90% of his shots again, most likely, but I still feel like he's going to fill up the stat sheet. I still feel like
Hmm.
he's going to get a lot of rebounds. He'll still score a decent amount of points. So I'm trusting him as my captain. And then for my other two like star players, I have Stephen Curry and Draymond Green. I know Draymond Green was terrible from the field in the last game, but the difference between for me though with DraftKings and as opposed to the real life game is with DraftKings the field goal percentage doesn't mean anything. Your DraftKings is
Hmm.
all stats, is all that matters. It doesn't matter like how many good screens they set or how like well
Hmm.
or how well they contested a shot or how well they whatever. So I'm still picking Draymond because he's been averaging triple doubles lately, which you get bonus points for that. Um, and out of the like star players, quote unquote star players, he's like the cheapest one. So And then Stephen Curry, I mean, obviously he's going to get his numbers. Even if he's contained, he'll still get a lot of points. I opted for him instead of Kawhi. From some research I was reading, I guess, I don't know like what you've heard on this, Zach, but
Yeah.
apparently Kawhi has been like, it's not a major injury, obviously, because he's still playing, full minutes, but apparently he's been having some kind of leg injury or something, and he's not 100%. And so I don't know if that like affected him with his numbers in game one, but that's why I chose Stephen Curry
Yeah.
over Kawhi Leonard, because I did have a few hundred left in my salary space, and I could have picked Kawhi instead of Curry, but I'm sticking with
Yeah.
Curry. I have more confidence in him after the way he played in game one compared to Kawhi. And then I have two more Warriors players. So this is where I have four Warriors players and two Raptors players. I have Andre Iguodala and Sean Livingston.
Hmm.
Um, I was hesitant to pick Iguodala because it looked like he, got hurt at the end of the first game. But all the research I'm reading are saying that he's, good to go. The result was clean from his little X-ray or whatever, MRI, whatever they did. And so it seems to me like he has no limitations. And I'm sure the Warriors are probably going to start him because he's their best bet to guard Kawhi. So I
Hmm.
feel like, and his salary, I'm guessing it's because of the injury that he got in game one, but his salary dropped substantially. So I feel like I'm going to get, if he can, I think he got like 30 fantasy points in the last game. So if he can get anywhere near that for a salary of 4,600, I feel like I'm going to get a great value. Now, if there's
Hmm.
some report that comes out, Saturday or Sunday before the game that he's limited and isn't going to play much, then I'm going to get him out of there. I'll have to make some adjustments on it, but from what I'm reading right now, he's good to go, so I'm going to stick with him. Livingston, his salary went up a little bit, but he plays a good 20 to 25 minutes a game, so I figure again at 3,200 that's pretty cheap. I'll take the value. So then my other Raptors player, my last player is Danny Green. He definitely did a pretty solid job in game one from the field with his threes, which you get bonus points for that on DraftKings.
Hmm.
Again, he's going to be more of like a role player. I'm not, expecting him to break the bank, but if the Warriors keep making adjustments on like Siakam and Gasol and other players, like that might leave him with some more looks. So, so if you're wondering why I have four Warriors players and two Raptors players, when even though I think the Raptors are going to win, it's because I feel like the Raptors players that were available are they're more expensive than they were in the first game because they obviously, since they for the most part outperformed the Warriors players, their salaries went up. So like I know Marc Gasol's went up over 1,000. Um, Siakam's went up, although I did still pick him, but most of the Raptors players went up, whereas some of the Warriors players went down a little bit. So, especially Andre Iguodala, he was the biggest drop off. So, that's why I leaned more towards the Warriors players than I did the Raptors players. So, Zach, I know you told me before we went on the air that your lineup was a lot different than mine. So,
Yeah, it was.
I'm looking forward to hearing the difference between our lineups. So I'll
Yeah.
let you
Okay.
give your lineup now.
Sure. So I've got my captain. I guess before I say my lineup, I'll tell you guys how I ended up finishing in the standings for last night's game. So I want to say like halfway through the first quarter, I was in the top five. Like I was, but obviously that's still really early. Um, and then second quarter was bad for me. I slipped down to like eight or ninth. I was between that 8 and 10 spot actually for a good part of the second quarter, and then starting into the third, and then I kept going up a little bit. I think I got up to seven, and then Klay Thompson, like Eric said earlier, he came. He started scoring more points and getting more DraftKings points. With all the
Getting those
rebounds and assists and
stats.
stuff. Yep. So he ended up, contributing a lot towards the end there for my totals final score. So I just kept slowly going up, and then what helped me was Gasol got in foul trouble, Lowry got in foul trouble. A lot of guys that I didn't have, that a lot of other people had in between fifth place, because I needed to top in the first five to get the win. A lot of those guys that were in my way to get to fifth place had the people that were in foul trouble, which was big for me because all of my players were in the game and they only had like 2/3 of their players in the game. So that benefited me, and then I was able to, go up in the fourth place. It was pretty close though between, I definitely didn't win by, as much as Eric did. Like I think I only ended up the difference between me and sixth place, who was like the best loser, so to say, was only like 3 DraftKings points. So it was pretty close, pretty nerve wracking to watch there. But I
Yeah,
did win.
I'm glad I had the much less stressful
Yeah,
situation to deal with.
Eric was pretty secure, around halftime that he was, gonna at least win, but he was solidly in first place for the whole game. But going into my lineup for game 2, I've got Curry as my captain just because, he scored, I think, the second most fantasy points in that game. And he's
I
the number
believe
one.
so,
Yeah,
yes.
and he's the sure number one option on Golden State. Like, I would be, I would be shocked if he is not the number one scorer and, fantasy point guy for Golden State. So that's why, and then also, I'm predicting Golden State to win the game, so I think he's going to have a good game and fuel their win. Um, I've got Kawhi Leonard, so this is the second game now in a row here where I've got both Curry and Kawhi. Statistically wise, Kawhi was frustrating to be my captain because, he also was the most expensive player last week. Or not last week, last game. So I there's something about Kawhi where I can't trust him to be the captain right now. But obviously he's still got, he's still going to play almost the whole game, and he's, going to get some good numbers. So obviously anybody can defend that pick. And then I got Klay Thompson, who I think is going to be a big contributor for the win, because I've still got Golden State winning. I think he's going to contribute a lot. I think he'll do even better than he did in game 1. He picked up some fouls, I think, that and some turnovers that kind of messed with his numbers a little bit. So I expect him to improve on what he did. And then for my, more role players, not my stars, I've got Van Vliet, Serge Ibaka, and McKinney. So in that order, they're like the significance. So Van Vliet's he was the highest priced out of those 3 at 5,800 salary. But the reason I picked him is he had 33 minutes. He comes off the bench apparently, but he plays starter minute wise. Like he had 33 minutes and he had 15 points. He had a pretty good game. I feel like, he'll be able to at least replicate that. And then for it being, a little bit more than Danny Green, I think he plays a little bit more than Danny Green. And I think his game is a little bit more diverse than Danny Green's game, which is pretty much just a 3-point shooter, which I know DraftKings is more on 3-point shooters, but I feel like Van Vliet's the more overall player and can get more points from like rebounding and stuff like that. But so I've got him, and then I've got Serge Ibaka, who is a carryover. I didn't realize this, but I guess I have 4 players that I had in the last game. I for this one I changed my lineup around a few times actually.
Yeah, same. It was difficult for me.
So I think Serge Ibaka was like the last player I picked, but I didn't have, I had limited salary at that point, so it was, between him and like Powell on the Raptors, and I was comparing Powell and Ibaka, and Powell only had 5 minutes. Ibaka had 17. So it was a pretty, easy pick between the two on that. But I don't have the utmost confidence in Ibaka. Um, he gets some blocks, but offensively,
Yeah,
I want to say he only got his points from dunks or something, but so he's not, expected to be much for me, but from what was available at the uh at the time, with only having that limited amount of money, he was the best that I could do with that amount. And then I've got McKinney, who was by far the cheapest guy. He was 2,000 cheaper than Ibaka, and he's like in the price range around like Jonas Jerebko and Bogut. And I was actually surprised that Bogut didn't play at all. Like nobody in our group had Bogut, I think, but if some people
no.
took him, they would they wouldn't be happy that he got a zero because he had 0 minutes. But and and I think now, like like you were saying earlier with DeMarcus Cousins, not really showing up. I think the Warriors are gonna play Bogut in game two, um, just to try something different because it didn't work for him in game one. So I expect him to play, but uh, the reason I picked McKinney, and McKinney only played game one for 8 minutes, but it's mainly dependent on the injury with Iguodala, because Iguodala, I expect him to play, but I don't expect him to be like 100%, obviously. And I know against Portland he also had an injury. I can't remember what the injuries were, but the fact that he's dealing with like two injuries in like the last two games, uh, it's got a big question mark for me. And I think they're gonna McKinney plays that same position, that small forward position that Iggy plays. So Iggy's health is the main reason why I picked him there, and he was only 2,200. He only had like a few fantasy points because he didn't play much, but I expect his minutes to go up with Iguodala's health being somewhat of a question mark. But as an overall assessment of my lineup, it's another like top heavy lineup with Curry and Leonard and Thompson, and then Van Vliet's a starter, and then the other two aren't. So I feel like Eric probably has more starters in his lineup, but I've got more stars. So
Yeah, and I will say if when you made the comparison of Van Vliet having a better overall game than Danny Green, I mean, I definitely agree with that. If Sean Livingston's salary had stayed at 2,200 like it was for the last game, or maybe it was 2,400, I don't remember, but either way, if it had stayed the same that it was in game one, I would have had the extra money to where I could afford Van Vliet over Danny Green, and I would totally make that switch. But I just kind of, after picking my first three guys, that I went with, who were all pretty expensive, I just didn't have the room left to get them. But yeah, so once again, though, for the listeners, you have two different options or two different styles of lineup selections to
mm-hmm.
go off of here if y'all want to make a lineup. So
And I do want to add one more final point before we wrap this show up, but
sure.
the the main reason why I did not end up picking Siakam, which I'm sure a lot of people are going to have, is because of the point that I was talking about earlier in that Bucks series, where you know every other game that they won, it was I mean, Kawhi was consistent, but their second, big scorer and big contributor was like different every game. Like there was one game where Danny Green had like a huge night. There was one game where Siakam had a huge night. Van Vliet and Ibaka and Gasol and all those got Lowry. I I just can't trust Siakam to have as good of a game that he had. And of course his salary rose, probably more than anybody's after
Yeah,
that
his
first game. So
his
that's
went up his went up like 800, I think.
yeah.
It's a pretty good chunk.
So while like obviously I'd like to have him, I to me like balancing that 800 increase and my prediction that he isn't going to do as well because both the Warriors are going to prep for it and the fact that the Raptors, it could be any guy any night, which is so hard to predict, like it's so hard to predict which player's going to come up in each game. Usually Kawhi comes up in every game, but and I'm sure Siakam will be fine, but like I just don't expect him to have the statistically as he might have a as just of a good impact in the game. He could have hit a game-winning shot, but like you said, they don't take those things into consideration. And I feel like he's a really good player, but I do feel like he's going to have statistically less DraftKings points than he had in Game 1. But
yeah, I mean, I could definitely see that happening. Like I said, for me, the reason why I went with him as my captain was because, of course, with the captain rate costing, 1.5 times more, I felt like, because I think with the 1.5 times rate, let's see. Oh yeah, you got it on the screen here. Yeah, so like Stephen Curry and Kawhi Leonard's captain rate is about 3,000 more than what Siakam's is. So I was like, well, let me take, Siakam, save that 3,000. And then that gave me a little more room, because then I was able to still pick Steph Curry and, Draymond, who I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if I had picked Stephen Curry as my captain or Kawhi, I might not have been able to still afford, those other moves. So I'm not expecting Siakam to do as great as he did in the first game, but I think with the 1.5 times points, he's still going to get me a nice, good amount.
Yeah.
And then, and then I'm relying on, those Warriors players. But, like I said, if all my Warriors players have a bad game and then Toronto wins the game, like, I'll be fine with losing my $3.
Yeah.
So
you'll be like splitting even.
Yeah, basically I'll basically have broken even. So, I won't complain too hard.
Yeah.
So
awesome, man. Well, that's going to be it for the show today, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed what you heard. It was, Eric and I talked about this earlier. Like, we thought it was important that our predictions and DraftKings lineups were successful to add some credibility to our names. I'm obviously not the smartest person. I'm not going to get every game right and everything, but it was cool that we both, got everything right in that first episode. Obviously that's going to change in this next one because we each have different teams winning the game, but still it was a lot of fun to record and everything. And
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so look forward to hearing Game 3 coming up in a few days from now. But that'll be it for today, guys. So take care and see you later.
Peace. See, I'll hit. That's gonna be my signature thing, at least for now on. Let me hit stop recording here. Yeah, there we go.